They have the actual, they have the product, the smart dust, and it can be blown in the air. I already showed this past video that it runs on your own body's temperature and vibration, and these things can be done remotely. This is in 2004, understand, right? It's just, this is very possible stuff. I had quite an interesting question to throw at you in regard to, yeah, exactly. He's showing, for those listening, DARPA and the BRAIN Initiative. That's exactly the point. What do you think about the possibility? I know you had said, at least, or some of the videos at least claim that they looked at masks that were like right out of the box, correct? So
right, yes.
Here, one, is it possible that this is something, in the cases where it's not, that this is, I guess, being breathed on from people? And but to the point to where they're bringing them out of the box, does this possibly just speak, do you think, to the idea that it's just ubiquitous, that these things are everywhere? And in that point, then maybe we should start looking under a microscope at a lot of different things and see if we find those same black things.
Great questions. And yes, people have been telling me that they've been looking at all sorts of different things under the microscope. Some products will have it, like feminine products, like wipes or something, and then have been spotted with these on there. But they look at tissues or something, and they're not there. So I would think if they were on, I would think that they would be on tissues, just like they were on anything else. Yeah. And yeah, it seems like they're already in the, laying on the mask, sometimes even embedded between multiple layers of fabric. So it seems like something at the manufacturing plant. Now, I'm not sure if it's just something stray that landed on there. Maybe they're the same cotton facilities. People have also suggested maybe this has to do with some spraying they've been doing to the cotton fields, and it just has contaminated the cotton supply. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
That's an interesting thought. And again, of course, it all ends up in the same direction, right? Whether this is nefarious nanotechnology or just malfeasance by the government, it still amounts to hurting you because they don't care about what's best for you. It's frustrating. But you also spoke about the swabs. That's another big part of this, right? Because there's videos I've seen of people pointing out similar stuff on the swabs themselves. And that's what, so if we're not finding them on other cotton products or other, around the area, but we are seeing them specifically on the two parts that are equally involved with things that are in and around your face all the time around COVID-19, I find that to be quite telling, right? Is this one
very suspect? Absolutely, extremely suspect. And why are they shoving these swabs like way up people's nose? That's never made sense to me. Also, the masks don't make sense. But if you look at this,
go ahead. No, well, I was just going to say they've never even. I mean, this. I keep asking this. I have not seen one single legitimate, solid answer about why ever they need to jam that thing back to your blood-brain barrier. There's no. I mean, if we have tests right now where all they're doing is swabbing the inside of your nose. Why is that? I mean, that's still happening. I just saw a report of a lady who had internal bleeding from something when they poked it up too far. No one's explaining why that's happening. That is a test in and of itself. Something's happening there. I'd love to hear more about that from anybody out there that can explain why that needs to happen. It's telling.
It is, because you would think if it's like the most contagious virus ever, or I'm exaggerating there, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but they say it's very contagious. You would think that they could just take a little bit of a saliva sample, right, and run that.
I mean, that's the whole point, right? The masks and the saliva. It's like there's so many counterintuitive points here. But the blood-brain barrier discussion in regard to nanotechnology has also been a really big focus. I could probably just search for one. Let me see if I can get one to pop up. But I covered this on the show not too long ago.
And then there's also the ethylene oxide and all these chemicals that they keep finding on all the products. And it's just like, are they really caring about our health? It doesn't seem like this is an appropriate, apt response.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see if this pops up. Here, this is interesting. Nanotech jumps blood-brain barrier to kill cancer in mice. What do you know? It connects to cancer. This is random search, right? I didn't even know this was going to pop up. It's very telling that that's one of the things I keep trying to tell people to look at in regard to this whole thing. Is there is an unbelievable amount of connections and ties between the people, the same groups, the same companies, the same agenda from 9/11 forward and even before. Here's I think this is one of the ones I actually covered on the show. Blood-brain delivery methods using nanotechnology. I mean, and people called this out in the swabs a long time ago, pointing out that was possible. But now when we actually have, I'm sorry, I'm not showing my screen. I was showing this a second ago. Here's the one I was just showing, so you guys can see the one I was exclaiming about, but wasn't showing. Nanotech jumps blood-brain barrier. But what's interesting is that now that we actually have the videos like you were showing that show on the swabs, That's one step we didn't have from before. So what's the end game here? Hypothetically, this is an action being taken by your government. Let's play with that. What's the end game? What are they trying to accomplish in your mind?
I wish I had an answer. I just have a lot of questions at this point, but I like the question you posed there. Are they trying to infest people with these little devices or organisms? I'm not sure. And what would that accomplish? Would that prep people for the DARPA Brain Initiative? Would that cause people to be sick? Oh, another interesting thing we haven't talked about is the WHO and mainstream media has been coming out against like ivermectin or whatever it's pronounced,
right,
and hydrochloroquine. And I believe those are both parasite treatment drugs.
Interesting.
So that's another interesting thing. What if they want people to? I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor or anything, but
posit all you want, man. I mean, that's the whole point. Like, we shouldn't be afraid as long as we're being clear. We're just hypothesizing here. There's no reason we should be afraid of that. It's just funny that, and not that we're afraid, but the point is, it's just funny how they're constantly trying to tailor the way we work to make sure that we're like, we're too afraid to get into speculation. That's what this is all about. As long as we're willing to be honest about that speculation and say that it's speculation, that's some of the most important discussion. Because if all we're doing is staying inside the boundaries, we're never going to find the answers, right? And that's why I appreciate the work you're doing here, because you are being objective. See that what's strange to me on that one right there, what it's showing is that you can see one moving above it in like almost in unison with it. Do you see that?
That is, yes, I do see that. For some of these people will exhale on it, and maybe that would explain it. But still, I mean, if you've ever done, and I've done some experimentation, I haven't actually looked at it under a microscope or anything like Max Egan has, but just with some stray fibers that I find or a hair or something, if you blow on it, it might blow a little bit down across your desk, but it's not going to like wiggle in place like these are. So it just doesn't make any sense to me how these are behaving and why they're acting that way.
Yeah.
But they also don't look like a worm. I don't buy that these are like some sort of organic worms.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just some type that I'm not familiar with.
No, I'm with you on that. My gut, there's just, based on what we know, based on what they're capable of, like here's my thought, right? If they've got something that is, an eighth of the grain of eighth of the size of a grain of salt in 2004, right? That is basically a small little sphere. Why would they make them? I mean, who knows? Maybe there's an answer that's better this way, or maybe there's something about the invasiveness of the way the brain works, but it seems to be counter to the idea of having something that small that could just be like blown into the air, but it also doesn't make sense that the other fibers aren't moving around it with the mask, and there's other black parts next to it that also aren't moving. There's obviously more questions than answers in here, and that's why we're doing this today. But I think that what our governments are capable of and what they've done in the past gives us every right to speak up and question what this is. And, look, what's funny to me is that they will break out with 13 different fact-checking articles the moment we step into something that has source material, right? When we're like proving, here's a study that says masks do this, or that lockdowns are bad for us. And it's like, fact check. And they all, weirdly dismiss something that's not even related to what you were saying. But then we have something like this, where it's like, okay, there's weird questions that need answering. People everywhere are pointing it out, and it just no one even talks about it. Like, that's what tends to be, it's interesting when we see the different responses there, and I definitely think that there's something here that needs to be discussed further.
And I think it's a great opportunity for discussion to happen. And then you can also I can also bring in the other, no pun intended, the other threads from our research into the discussion, because it gives us a chance to talk about Parker Crutchfield's article where they're talking about, dosing us to control our minds. Right. And, the lithium and the fluoride in the water, and DARPA Brain, and these Morgellons, the Morgellons research people have been doing. So I think it is a great opportunity, since there are a lot of eyes on this. People should step into the place and try to look at it rationally, and actually have intelligent conversations where they're not dismissive and they're actually trying to explain these things. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And that's the whole point of having, dialogue, discussion, to be actually engaged with this. Here's something else somebody sent me. I was actually just looking at this, by the way, and I haven't done I'm not very familiar with this actual graphene in general, but we were just talking about this as something that might actually be on the masks themselves. So there's an interesting crossover here, like where somebody was saying that there was graphene that was on these masks, which makes them dangerous. Now, somebody sent me this in regard to that they found that there might be a connection between these things, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with graphene or what that might be, and this may be what we're looking at, or maybe that's something that is connected to this. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah, I do. The Canadian government just put this out a couple days ago, April the 2nd. Face masks that contain graphene may pose health risks, and it's actually making some ripple splash in the news, which is good to see. But a lot of people have been wearing these masks thinking that they're protected, and it just opens up a whole can of worms. And it's very concerning that people could be wearing carcinogenic material, or just the fact that people are obstructing their breathing passageways, I think could have tremendous effects that they're not accounting for, or maybe they are. I really don't even think that, it's benevolent at this point, the mask mandates. It really seems like some sort of I don't know. It's like, it's definitely a psychological thing, but also it could be to make people more sick.
I'm convinced of that. I mean, that's my opinion, and I've made that clear every time. And I show the evidence, and I am convinced at some level it's, put it this way, whether or not my opinion, they have all the studies in front of them. They know about the study from the British Medical Journal, the only one about cloth masks that comes to the conclusion, the random controlled trial, that they increase your risk of infection, period, because of moisture retention. They know that that's there. It's the only random controlled trial for cloth masks. They know of all the studies coming from the NIH and from Oxford that show measurable reduction in blood oxygen level. They know all these things, right? So it's impossible to believe, at the very least, they're choosing to ignore them. Right. So, but my opinion, I'm convinced that they're using these products because they know it was used to create a larger illusion. They know from past things like 1918 that there's a huge, that as they admitted in the study, not discussing masks, by the way, but that there was bacterial pneumonia was the biggest killer in regard to 1918. I believe that was because of the mask. That's my opinion, but that's not what Fauci said in that study. That's a misrepresentation, but I do believe that that's very clear. So what we're dealing with today is masks continuing to be used and increasing our risk of bacterial pneumonia, which is contagious, which has the same symptoms of COVID-19, as well as a million other things it can cause, as well as, of course, you add on the PCR illusion to that, and there you go, But I'm convinced that these things are being done because it can be used to add to the illusion, And the problem is that people so many people, whether they actually think it's possible or not, will refuse to accept that because it makes them uncomfortable. And I get it, but it's sad.
Right. And I don't need any more reasons not to wear a mask. I as soon as I heard it, it was like, you can't be serious, right? And you've done such a great job on your channel exposing all the proof of that. And this is just one more thing that's like, is this another piece of the puzzle why they're so adamant about us wearing the masks? These little black strands that seem to have a life of their own. But yeah, it's definitely a fascinating investigation into these masks, because there's something strange here. And the fact that the United States government has no issue importing all these masks from China, which is supposed to be one of our military adversaries, it doesn't make any sense.
And again, that speaks to the idea that I think there's much more collaboration going on there than we'll admit to ourselves.
100%.
Even through Israel, this is Israel's been working militarily, providing information. So is the U.S. for that matter. James Corbett did a great video about this, showing that the new China rollout for their military was like, it might as well be the U.S. equipment. It's like, look at that. They've got all the same. It's not, there's more happening there than we will admit. And as James always speaks to in his work, that it's the engineered fall of the West, which kind of seems to be happening right now. It's quite telling.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of money to make to be a politician who sells out to China.
Right.
And just runs our country into the ground. They're looking to spend another $4 trillion or something. I'm sure you know more about this than I do on infrastructure, and like a very small percentage of it goes to roads and bridges, and it's crazy to me.
I actually think that, and you're right, it's a joke the way those are always broken down, but I actually feel like what they did there was they finally, after 20 trillion, they finally use this. The legislation to do things we may want to some degree, right? Water infrastructure has been a problem for 50 to 100 years in this country, right? I mean, we've known this. Derek Rose wrote an article 5 years ago about how it was a huge issue